It looks like animation is entering a new era because of the amount of recent releases that are trying to stylize their 3D animation by adding touches that give them a 2D effect in one way or another. We saw that in animated works like The Mitchells vs. the Machines, Arcane, The Bad Guys, and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Most of these have been fairly successful, and we still have more releases to anticipate like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and even Disney's Wish. All of these changes in style can be linked back to, of course, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, so it's not an exaggeration to say that this movie literally changed animation, and it's also safe to say that its innovative style is the reason behind that change. But I still feel like that's not the full picture. Into the Spider-Verse is a remarkable movie on pretty much every level, and if we look into the process that led into its creation, we can find a universal principle that applies to the greatest works across all art forms. Into the Spider-Verse is unique because it's evident that the people behind it took the time to observe, understand, and learn from a variety of works both in and outside of the medium, and utilized what worked for them and added their own touch to it. If the movies inspired by Into the Spider-Verse have succeeded so far, it's because they learned from it in a thoughtful, critical way that goes beyond just copying 2D line work or incorporating motion blurs and smears and all of that. See, it is true that the film stands out because of the techniques used to give it a 2D feel, but it's worth looking into the reasoning behind that choice in the first place. What we find is an attempt to give justice to the source material, not only narratively but also aesthetically. So when making animation movies, it's important to think about how the film relates to other works it's based on, or ones that preceded it, or share a medium with it, which in this case is animation. So first we should look at what makes animation so special and how we can use that to represent a work from a different medium. Since this was based on a comic book, the creators sat down and thought about what makes that particular medium unique and how that can be replicated and blended in an animated movie. So this remarkable style was a result of them trying to capture the unique energy of a comic book and the dynamic panel layout so that watching the movie will also evoke that experience of going through the pages of a comic book. And I'm really in love with this idea and wish to see it in the movies to come. Not in the sense that every movie should feature comic book's visual style, but just follow the concept of sitting down and thinking about the way we can pay tribute to mediums and other stories that relate to the works using the infinite potential that animation provides us. It's even almost ironic that Into the Spider-Verse is so unique precisely because it carefully made use of other works and didn't go out of its way to try and be different. So when it comes to the comic books, it took direct inspiration, but this interaction with other works of art could be unintentional as well. In literature, this concept is known as intertextuality, which refers to the interconnectedness that exists between all texts, be it through direct references and allusions, or even unintentionally, meaning that all works of art influence each other, no matter how original they may seem. When that kind of interaction travels across different mediums, we call it intermediality. What we have in Into the Spider-Verse is a bit of both and a mixture of bits and pieces of other work that feel like a love letter to art as a whole. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish functions in the same way, both in its interaction with its prequel, the Shrek universe, and the fairy tales that it references. Arcane pays the same kind of tributes to League of Legends and the medium of video games in general. This is what I mean when I say the influence of Into the Spider-Verse goes way beyond just a stylistic choice. And since we're within the realm of animation, it is not crazy to think that the influence goes as far as including some of the most acclaimed works in the history of animation, which are Studio Ghibli movies. If you think about what made all of these movies work, you'll find a pattern in common. Into the Spider-Verse establishes a world that feels both very realistic and lived in. There is a close attention to small details and all of those imperfections that make New York City feel alive, but at the same time blended in with fantasy elements that feel like the result of truly rich imagination in terms of motion, light, colors, and overall variety, reminding you that this is how far animation can go, and it's incredible. And there is nothing that speaks to Studio Ghibli movies more than that kind of marriage between the real and the magical, that makes the world feel familiar enough to immerse you, but also otherworldly enough to take you to another different dimension. In that, it does something that animation as a medium achieves best, which is to give those inanimate settings a life and a character of their own. So the New York of Into the Spider-Verse evokes the same dynamic feel we found with the Spirit World, or Howl's Moving Castle, or the Forest of the Deer. The influence doesn't stop at other animation movies though, but also goes to cover live-action cinema as well. For one, Into the Spider-Verse couldn't be as rich as it is without all the live-action Spider-Man adaptations that it blends in. Incorporating universes, characters, and storylines that we are familiar with definitely added a lot more value to it. In terms of cinematography, it also makes use of certain live-action techniques that add a touch of realism to it, and serves as a tribute to the other adaptations. We see that reflected in the lightning and shadows, the dynamic camera movements, and the frame jumps and smears. Not to mention the direct references to specific forms of art like the noir subgenre of comics through the character of Spider Noir. We also get the cartoonish parody version of the character known as Peter Porker or Spider Ham, and then there is the representation of anime and manga through the character of Penny Parker. All of these versions of Spider-Man exist in Marvel comics that take inspiration from mediums like film noir or animanga, and in featuring them, Into the Spider-Verse contributes to enriching this kind of interaction between all art forms. The movie also feels like a love letter to street art by painting a visual aesthetic that resembles that of graffiti that we can see reflected in the setting and the backgrounds, but also incorporated in the narrative itself, as it lies at the core of the main character's artistic expression that drives his motivation, since he aspires to become an artist, but that also informs the conflict in the story, since it seems to be at odds with what is expected from him by his father and also his educational environment. And just like that, street art is blended in, not just visually, but also within the story itself. A last inclusion I would like to mention is a reference to literature through the classic Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, that Miles is assigned to write an essay about. When it comes to this one though, I don't think the representation goes really that deep, since it seems like the story mirrors only the title and points to the great responsibility that comes with being Spider-Man, but I still found it to be a nice little addition. With that, we have a really wide range of forms and mediums of art that interact in one movie, and I think that plays an important role in the success and the cultural significance that Into the Spider-Verse has gained over the years. It goes to show that inspiration from other works of fiction is not necessarily a bad thing, even though that's what it looks like from all the sequels and remakes we keep seeing recently from Disney. It's less about merely recycling content that already exists, but more about the lack of effort behind the creation of these movies. When you watch them, you can tell they don't bother to properly craft them because they know there's guaranteed revenue to them anyway. When you think about Into the Spider-Verse, it could easily be the same. In the end, it's an expansion of an already highly successful franchise that people were going to see anyway. But I think the better way to look at it is that, in this case, you might as well take a risk, experiment, and try to create something unique. In the end, you can afford it, so why not? And I think that's the kind of thought process that led to the creation of Into the Spider-Verse. And now it seems like a lot of other studios are following suit. It has worked pretty well so far with Puss in Boots and Arcane, but I really hope this doesn't just become a stylistic trend that simply gets copied without adding any value. Disney seems to catch up on that through its new movie Wish, and I don't want to be quick to judge, but I'm still worried given its history. I hope Wish will be a movie they put true effort into and not just throw in that line work to give it a 2D feel and expect people to eat it up. I think it's nice that they're taking inspiration from Into the Spider-Verse, but I hope they put some thought into it and see how they can use it to their advantage and pay their own tribute to Disney itself, and also add their touch and twist to create something that both feels like a love letter to old great works of animation as well as Into the Spider-Verse, and also bring something new to the table. In my opinion, that's how the greatest works of animation are made. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you like the content here. Now I've got to say goodbye and see you in another video.